I work at a lighthouse. A very old, very remote lighthouse. And let me tell you, it has some very strange rules. Rules that are there to protect us. Always follow them. Deep in the rugged cliffs of the Pacific Northwest is a small isolated community known as Havens Point, and just off its craggy coast, standing tall against the ceaseless crash of waves, is the Havens Point Lighthouse. It's the only beacon guiding ships safely through the treacherous waters of the Devil's Teeth Reef, the sole passage in and out of our secluded bay. For generations, this lighthouse has been the silent guardian of our shores, its light a symbol of safety, yet its history shrouded in local whispers and ancient lore. Now, I've heard a lot of rumors about that old lighthouse. Some say it keeps the monstrous horrors of the deep at bay, warding off creatures that lurk in the abyssal trenches. Others claim it's actually to keep us from straying too far out to sea, to keep us trapped within the protective confines of the bay, and a few even whisper that it's a gateway to some place different from our world, a dark and unfathomable realm beneath the waves, where forgotten things reside. But what I do know for sure is that it's undeniably important to our town. So important, in fact, that it's considered a great honor to be chosen to operate the light at night. Only the oldest families in town, those whose lineage traces back to the very first settlers, are allowed to take on this sacred duty. And my family, well, we pretty much founded Havens Point. As the chief fisherman's son, I was finally old enough to do a shift, to step into a legacy I was only just beginning to understand. Thomas, you know why we're here, right? Dad's voice was rough, like sandpaper. He always sounded like he'd just finished yelling, his words carrying the weight of years spent battling the sea, which, to be fair, he usually had. I nodded, my heart thumping in nervous rhythm against my ribs, knowing better than to take this assignment lightly. Yeah, it's about more than just keeping the light on. It's about keeping everything in order. Maintaining the balance, right? I said, my voice barely steady. Exactly. It's an honor. You're not just keeping the ship safe, you're maintaining a tradition that's protected us for generations, he said, his gaze fixed on the imposing structure before us. The lighthouse seemed to loom over us, a silent ancient sentinel against the encroaching dusk. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the isolated coastline. Out here, son, you're alone with the sea. No one can reach you. No one can help. It was a stark warning, delivered with the weight of experience. We reached the base of the lighthouse. No one has to operate it during the day. The automated system handles it, bathing the bay in its steady, reassuring glow. Anyone can sail in and out, whenever they want, during daylight hours, but at night, it's a different story. Someone was always in the lantern room, after sundown, a solitary guardian against unseen threats, but no one really talks about what happens during those shifts. We weren't allowed to leave the harbor at night anyway, so no one really bothered to find out the true nature of the night shifts. We just accepted it as part of life in Havens Point. In front of the heavy steel door was a weathered wooden plaque, its carvings faded by countless storms and years. It detailed the regulations for entry. It simply read, "One salty tear to pass through." Dad unlocked the door with a key that seemed almost as old as the lighthouse itself. The old metal creaked loudly as it opened, a mournful groan echoing in the deepening twilight. He led me inside. It was cramped with the two of us there, the air thick with the metallic tang of salt, the heavy scent of old oil, and something else, a faint, almost imperceptible mustiness that spoke of secrets held for centuries. He reached into his slicker and pulled out a rolled-up piece of parchment, brittle with age and seemingly fragile. He handed it to me with a stern look, his eyes conveying a silent plea for diligence. Now anyone can pass by, as long as they offer the tear. But that's more symbolic than anything. These are the rules you really need to follow. Don't break them, no matter what you hear or see. Your life, and perhaps the safety of Haven's Point itself, depends on it, Dad said, his voice dropping to a low, serious tone that sent a shiver down my spine. Yeah, I can, I replied, my voice cracking as I forced a confident turn. He patted my shoulder. It was surprisingly gentle, a rare show of affection that belied his usual gruff demeanor. I know you can. I wouldn't ask if I didn't think you were ready. His voice softened for just a moment, a fleeting glimpse of the concerned father beneath the hardened fisherman. Then Dad turned to leave, his silhouette quickly swallowed by the encroaching darkness. It was getting dark fast, and he needed to be home soon, safe within the village before the true night descended. Remember, son, rules are what protect us. It's how the town has survived all these centuries. Our ancestors knew things we don't, and their wisdom is bound in these very instructions. I watched him disappear into the twilight before unrolling the parchment. The ancient paper crackled softly as I spread it open, its surface covered in faded, elegant script. I read through the rules, my brow furrowed in confusion. Some of them made no sense at all, their meaning utterly opaque. Do not acknowledge the singing. Cleanse the lens when the clock strikes midnight. Ignore the figures in the fog from 3 a.m. to 4. Do not accept anything from the drowned mariner. Never turn off the old foghorn. Ignore all whispers from the deep. Always salute the captain of the lost fleet. If you hear a sound like giant wings flapping in the water, immediately extinguish all light. I stared at the list, trying to figure it out. What drowned mariner, and what were the figures in the fog and the singing? Were these riddles, or something like that? A test of my wits, but Dad wasn't the type to do that sort of thing. He wouldn't pull a prank like this, not when the safety of the town was at stake. Nothing made him happier than keeping order around here, than seeing things function as they should. So, I figured I'd better take it seriously, no matter how baffling some of the instructions seemed. I flicked a switch by the ladder. A single incandescent bulb hummed to life in the small living space beneath the lantern room, casting a warm, slightly dusty glow. But honestly, the lighthouse wasn't that bad. It actually looked pretty cozy. There was a worn armchair with a thick wool blanket draped over it, inviting me to sink into its embrace. A small pot-bellied stove sat on the floor, still radiating a faint warmth from the previous shift, a comforting presence against the growing chill of the night. A small basin with a polished brass mirror stood in one corner, reflecting the faint light. Some nautical charts, yellowed with age, and an old, brass foghorn rested on a sturdy wooden table mounted on the wall. The foghorn hummed softly in the background, a low, rhythmic thrum that provided a strange hypnotic counterpoint to the distant crash of waves. I checked its pressure gauge and found it was set to automatic, a minor relief in the face of the unknown. I started to make myself at home, trying to settle my racing nerves. I brought some water and hardtack with me, plus a thermos of clam chowder Dad made. I unscrewed the cap and took a nice big gulp. Dad wasn't the best cook, but the soup reminded me of home, of warmth and safety. It was nice and familiar, a comforting anchor in this unsettling new environment. All right, let's do this, I said to myself, my voice a mere whisper in the vast silence of the lighthouse. I looked at my watch. It was 6:15 p.m. The sun had completely vanished now, swallowed by the horizon, leaving behind only the inky blackness of the ocean night. Dad said I could only leave when dawn broke, when the first rays of sunlight kissed the waves. I locked the heavy steel door behind me, the clang of metal echoing ominously. Before I settled into the armchair and pulled the blanket over my legs, I figured it would be a long night, filled with unknown challenges, so I might as well get comfortable and prepare myself. The first half hour was peaceful, almost deceptively so. I flipped through an old sea shanty book, its pages worn smooth by countless hands, the familiar lyrics a soothing balm to my anxiety. The only sounds were the distant roar of the ocean and the gentle thrum of the foghorn, a steady heartbeat against the wildness of the sea. Then I saw some distant lights on the horizon, faint pinpricks of luminescence against the dark canvas of the ocean. They came from a small fishing trawler, headed out of the bay, its silhouette distinct against the fading light. It was weathered and old, like most around here, a seasoned vessel that had seen many storms. It chugged steadily towards the lighthouse, its engine a low rumble. I set my book down, my attention drawn to the approaching vessel, watching as the trawler eased up close to the base of the lighthouse. The captain, a grizzled old man with a weathered face, emerged from the cabin and placed a single, glistening tear on the collection plate. Routine stuff, right? A customary offering for safe passage. I pressed the button to activate the green guiding light, signifying safe passage, and gave a friendly wave as the trawler rolled past, its stern light slowly diminishing in the distance. But then, something odd struck me as the stern lights faded into the distance, a chilling realization that sent a prickle of unease down my spine. I realized I couldn't picture the captain at all. All I could remember was a frown, just a blurry, indistinct frown, like a smudged charcoal drawing. I couldn't remember if he had a beard, what he was wearing, or even if the captain was tall or short. Nothing. Nada. Just that lingering, unsettling frown. I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear the strange mental fog. I had to be more tired than I thought. But the more I tried to remember anything about the captain, the more that frown seemed to float in my memory, detached and disturbing. I couldn't attach a face to it, couldn't bring any other detail to mind. All I remember are the eyes, perfectly hollow eyes, like dark, bottomless pits, like something out of a chilling ghost story, something that wasn't quite right. And the old trawler. I racked my brain, trying to recall its name or any identifying marks, but couldn't think of anyone in Heaven's Point who owned one quite like that, or even knew of such a vessel. The whole thing made me profoundly uneasy. How could I not remember anything about someone I had just seen, interacted with, just moments ago? I shook my head, trying to dismiss it as a trick of the mind, a symptom of exhaustion, but the feeling of dread persisted. "Get it together, Thomas," I muttered to myself, my voice a shaky whisper, trying to regain my composure. But as I was still trying to shake off the weird feeling from earlier, to push the unsettling image from my mind, a small, sleek dinghy glided up to the lighthouse. It moved with an unnatural smoothness, cutting through the water without a ripple. The lone occupant was a middle-aged woman with a friendly face, her features illuminated by the lighthouse beam. She waved, a cheerful, almost too enthusiastic gesture. The familiar melody of Sloop John B. filled the air, carried by the gentle sea breeze, its notes clear and crisp. Man, that song took me back. Dad and I used to sing that in the house when he was in a good mood, his gruff voice surprisingly tuneful. It was a comforting memory, amidst the growing strangeness of the night. "Great song choice," I managed, a strained smile on my face. The woman replied with a smile and a thumbs up, her eyes sparkling with an almost childlike glee. She placed a single glistening tear on the collection plate and sailed off, humming along with the song, her voice a soft, melodic counterpoint to the engine's hum. But then things got weird, like deja vu weird. An unsettling sense of repetition washed over me. Another sleek dinghy, identical to the first, pulled up. The same woman, with the same smile. And the music, it picked up right where it had left off, as if the previous dinghy had simply paused the song. Another boat, and another, the same woman, the same frozen smile. Each time the song started, from the same place it had stopped, stitching itself note by surreal note, creating a haunting, endless melody. It was like watching the same scene on repeat, an endless, surreal performance. I checked my watch when the final Sloop John B notes faded away with the last sleek dinghy. 45 minutes had passed. 45 minutes of the same dinghy, the same woman, and the same song, over and over, an unsettling testament to the strangeness of the night. I swear those dinghies came by right after one another, their appearances almost instantaneous. It shouldn't have taken that long to get through the whole song, even with the brief pauses between each appearance. I rubbed my eyes, expecting to see the dinghy appear again, to resume its unsettling loop, but it didn't. The waters were quiet, unnaturally so, the night suddenly feeling a lot colder, the silence heavier than before. A few minutes later, as the silence pressed in around me, a spectral longboat showed up. It cut through the waves towards the lighthouse with an eerie blue glow, a ghostly luminescence that seemed to emanate from within the vessel itself, and it was coming from the direction of the town. That caught me completely off guard. Our town only had one longboat, the Sea Serpent, and this was clearly not it. Its form too ethereal, too otherworldly. Did something terrible happen back home? A disaster that brought forth such a chilling apparition. The boat pulled up to the lighthouse, its bow cutting silently through the water, and I braced myself for some terrible news, for a message of tragedy, as a figure rose from its depths. But instead of a familiar face, there was no face at all, no head, even. It was just a swirling vortex of seawater where the captain's neck should have been, a churning void of ocean. Yet his uniform was spotless, perfectly pressed, like he was ready for inspection on a formal occasion. He wore an old brass compass on a chain, but I couldn't make out the etchings on it, its details obscured by the strange blue glow. I could hear mournful, wailing noises coming from the depths of the boat, something ancient and sorrowful that didn't sound human or animal, a sound that chilled me to the bone. Remembering the rules, remembering Dad's stern instructions, I quickly saluted the captain of the lost fleet, my arm rising almost automatically. He returned the gesture, a crisp, precise movement that seemed normal despite everything else, despite the impossible nature of his very being. Then, without a word, without a sound, he steered his spectral vessel off into the night, vanishing as silently as he appeared, leaving only ripples in the water. After that unsettling encounter with the captain of the lost fleet, I took another long, deliberate look at Dad's list of rules. Seemed like they were far more literal than I initially thought, their meaning now terrifyingly clear. The old foghorn crackled to life as I read them over, its sudden loud sound making me jump, my nerves frayed. It started shifting its tone until it landed on a low, resonant hum I'd never heard before, a deep, vibrating sound that seemed to come from the very depths of the ocean. It called itself echoes from the deep, its voice a strange, ethereal presence in the lantern room. The sound was deep and calming, yet filled with a strange, otherworldly resonance, a sense of ancient power. It was saying how it was almost time for the midnight cleansing. I glanced at my watch, and my stomach dropped. It was nearly midnight. It didn't feel like I'd been in the lighthouse that long, the hours having dissolved in the face of the bizarre events. I scrambled to figure out how to follow the rule about cleansing the lens. The list said I had to cleanse something, but with what? What ancient ritual was I meant to perform? I searched the lantern room for some sort of clue, my eyes darting frantically, and that's when I noticed a small wooden chest under the main control panel. almost hidden from view. Inside, I found an old polished brass rag and a dusty bottle of sea salt solution, their surfaces worn with age. Just in time, a strange guttural chant started playing from the foghorn. It was unlike any sound I'd ever heard. Ancient and primal, I assumed it was the midnight cleansing. The voice mentioned its strange melody filling the room, but it wasn't like any sound I'd ever heard. It was a mix of deep resonating hums and a high-pitched, almost crystalline chiming sound that made the hairs on my neck stand up, a chilling symphony that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. I tried to change the setting, to silence the eerie chant, but the foghorn wouldn't let me. It was stuck on, its voice commanding the air. Outside the lantern room, just on the inner rim of the lens mechanism, a faint, glowing green symbol appeared. It formed a perfect spiral with ancient, barnacle-encrusted runes drawn on the inside, pulsing with an ethereal light. I dipped the brass rag in the sea salt solution, the liquid cool against my fingers, and carefully wiped over them. The symbol glowed brighter with every rune I traced, each stroke igniting a stronger luminescence. By the time I got to the last rune, it was blinding, an unbearable radiance. I could barely keep my eyes open, tears streaming down my face from the intensity. In the background, the sound from the foghorn was nothing but agonizing shrieks now, primal sounds of torment. I squeezed my eyes shut, instead, placing my hands over my face, waiting for it all to stop, for the terror to subside. Finally, the light blinked out, as suddenly as it appeared, plunging the room back into relative darkness. The symbol was completely gone, leaving no trace. The foghorn went silent for a moment, a blessed reprieve, before it switched back to its gentle, rhythmic thrum, its familiar heartbeat. Everything was back to how it should be, or at least how it appeared to be. But my heart was still pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I struggled to catch my breath, my lungs burning. I took out some water and just gulped it all down, trying to quench the sudden, overwhelming thirst. And that's when I heard it, a faint, mournful singing coming from outside, carried on the sea breeze, a sound of profound sorrow. I looked up, my gaze drawn to the dark expanse of the ocean. In the distance, I could see a shadowy figure stumbling through the shallow waters towards the lighthouse. It had a tattered, seaweed-strewn cloak, dripping with brine, clinging to its unseen form. Its face was covered up by its long, stringy hair, a veil of dark, slick strands. It staggered to the base of the lighthouse, its movements jerky and desperate, trying to push its way into the light, into my sanctuary. I called out to it, my voice trembling, while pointing to the plaque on the door. "Sir, all it costs is one salty tear. Please don't damage the structure. It's vital to our town," I hollered, my voice echoing across the water. But it was like it couldn't hear me, its attention fixed solely on gaining entry. Instead, it got even more agitated, its movements growing more frantic. It violently threw itself against the glass, leaving deep impacts and a horrific cracking sound, and each impact echoed in my head. It continued singing a lament, a haunting, sorrowful tune, like its heart had just broken into 1,000 pieces. I yelled for it to stop, hoping to snap it out of whatever trance it was in, to break the spell of its sorrow that caught its attention. It froze, its body rigid and still. It was like someone hit the pause button on a movie, suspending the action in an instant. It stayed like that for a few seconds, not moving an inch, its form a dark silhouette against the moonlit water. Then suddenly, it dropped to all fours, its limbs scrambling across the rocks with horrifying speed, headed right at me. Its head bobbed up and down as it moved, like its neck was on a string, its movements unnatural and disturbing. It kept singing even as it jumped to the lantern room window, its face pressed against the glass. It hung onto the lighthouse, its wet hands leaving trails on the glass, demanding I let it in with silent, desperate pleas. Then, without warning, it continued its assault on the glass. I tried to calm it down, to reassure it, but all it did was wail its sorrowful tune and continue its frantic, chilling assault on the glass. That's when I saw spectral blue lights in the distance. They came from the direction of the town, moving with incredible speed. The longboat pulled up fast, its ghostly form cutting through the water, and out stepped the captain of the lost fleet. He went straight for the figure, his movements fluid and purposeful. He grabbed it, his unseen hands securing it, and quickly got it off the lighthouse, pulling it away from the glass. I could see it struggling to break free as he pulled it into the depths of the longboat, its wails echoing across the water. Then I did the only thing I could do at that moment, the only action I knew would be correct. I put up a hand and saluted the captain of the lost fleet, my arm rising almost automatically. Rules are rules. He returned the gesture before steering off with the wailing figure, disappearing into the vast, dark expanse of the ocean. I settled back into the lighthouse, my body trembling, and figured I'd call Dad to ask what the hell was going on, to demand an explanation for these impossible events. Who was that headless captain? But of course, my phone had no signal, a dead weight in my hand. The questions would have to wait until morning, until the safety of daylight. I glanced at my watch. It was almost 2 a.m., and the night was far from over. A barnacle-covered, derelict fishing vessel, barely afloat, rolled up to the lighthouse. It looked like it would fall apart any minute, its planks groaning under the weight of the sea. The lone figure on deck was an old mariner, his face obscured by a thick, matted beard, who began fumbling for a salty tear as he reached the base of the light, his movements slow and deliberate. That was when I remembered one of the rules, a chilling warning that now resonated with terrifying clarity. Do not accept anything from the drowned mariner. I wasn't entirely sure if this was the drowned mariner the rule mentioned, but I wasn't taking any chances. Not after all I'd seen. I quickly hit the button to activate the green guiding light, a silent signal of my refusal. No need for that, sir. You can go right ahead, I told him, trying to sound as polite as possible, hoping my tone would convey the urgency of his departure. But he wouldn't have it. He insisted on giving me something, his hand outstretched, pushing this slimy, barnacle-encrusted shell at me. It pulsated faintly in the dim light. I reassured him. Really, it's okay. You don't have to offer anything tonight. Your passage is free. But he got more agitated, his movements becoming more forceful, shoving the shell closer to me, his eyes burning with an unsettling intensity. I looked closer at the shell he was so desperate to give me. It wasn't even a shell. Not truly. It was larger, weirdly pulsating under the moonlight, a faint rhythmic throb. The longer I looked at it, the more it seemed to shimmer, like it wasn't entirely real, its form wavering at the edges of my perception. Please, just go through. I started to beg, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't want anything to do with that shell, whatever was going on with it. It didn't feel right. It radiated an ominous energy. Despite my protests, the old mariner wouldn't budge. He leaned closer to me, his breath smelling of decay and salt water. Do you know who I am, young man? His voice was a raspy whisper, like wind through dry leaves. I shook my head, taking a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. I've never seen you before, sir, I lied, my voice wavering. I've known you since you were born, Thomas. I've been here every time a child was born. In Heaven's Point. Ever since your ancestors first settled this land and made a deal with me," he said, his eyes boring into mine with an ancient, knowing gaze. As he spoke, I noticed the barnacles from his vessel began to spread like a disease, like a creeping plague. They crawled up the sides and over the deck, covering the rotting wood. It didn't stop there. The barnacles spread to him, creeping onto his skin, consuming him, flaking off him whenever he moved, leaving a trail of shimmering dust. He continued, his eyes locking onto mine, a chilling intensity in their depths. "Your town owes much to that deal, boy. We had an agreement, safety and prosperity for Heaven's Point, in exchange for certain concessions, a price to be paid, a debt to be collected." His words made my stomach drop, a cold dread spreading through me. I didn't want to believe him, but the cold, dead look in his eyes and the supernatural spread of barnacles were all too real and immediate to dismiss, impossible to ignore. "What kind of deal?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a strained croak. He smiled, the barnacles on his lips cracking with the movement, revealing hints of the distorted flesh beneath. "A deal that's kept this place alive and thriving, protected from the true horrors of the deep." The barnacles were now eating away at his clothes, hands, and face. His features slowly started turning less human, his skin hardening and becoming calcified. It was like he was slowly turning into a coral statue, a gruesome living sculpture. "Remember, Thomas, every rule has its reason. Every pact has its price," he said, his voice becoming a watery gurgle as the barnacles claimed his throat, suffocating his words. With a final chilling nod, he threw the shell onto the water, its glistening surface sinking quickly, and steered towards town. His vessel left a trail of shimmering, organic particles floating in the air, catching the faint light from the lighthouse. I watched until his stern lights disappeared into the darkness, a lingering sense of dread in their wake, turning my attention back to the surface of the water where he had dropped the shell. It wasn't a shell anymore. Lying there in the calm water was something else, a giant, glistening human tooth stained with a dark, oily substance. But I didn't have time to dwell on it, didn't have a moment to process the unsettling discovery. Distant lights shone on the horizon, catching my eye, but they looked different. They weren't from a boat this time, but a single, powerful dive lamp. It moved rapidly towards the lighthouse from out of town, its beam cutting through the quiet of the night like a sharp knife. The figure wielding it wore a full diving suit, its form indistinct in the beam. I thought that was incredibly weird considering it was pitch black outside, and no one ever dove at night. The waters around Heaven's Point were too dangerous after dark. He swam up to offer his tear, his movements oddly graceful in the water, pulling back his mask to flash me a smile and a thumbs up as he passed through the green light, a fleeting moment of normalcy. But something went horribly wrong. Just as he got past the guiding beam, he suddenly lost control, his flippers thrashing wildly, leaving harsh, disturbed water in the calm bay. The diver crashed against the rocky shore, his body slamming against the jagged rocks, and he ended up pinned underneath, not moving, his lamp beam flickering erratically. "Hey, are you okay?" I called out, my heart racing, a surge of adrenaline pumping through me. He groaned in response, a weak, guttural sound, and weakly raised his hand, signaling me to come over and help. I was about to leave the lighthouse, to rush to his aid, when I remembered the rule, a cold voice in my mind: ignore all whispers from the deep. My stomach churned with conflict, a desperate battle between my human instinct to help and the chilling, imperative rules. I wanted to help him, to free him from his predicament, but those rules, they were there for a reason, right? to protect me from unseen dangers. Just then, I smelled something foul in the air, sharp and alarming, like rotting fish, a stench that made me gag. A strange bioluminescent green light erupted from the diver, pulsing and growing, and the motorist started screaming for help, his cries piercing the night. Thick, green phosphorescent smoke rose from his form, making it hard to see what was happening to the guy, obscuring him in a swirling, sickly glow. My instincts screamed at me to do something, to intervene, to save him. And I was just about to leave the lighthouse when he started calling out my name, his voice echoing in the mist. But wait, how did he know my name? I never told him, never exchanged a word with him beyond a greeting. I paused, my hand on the release latch for the entrance ladder, frozen in indecision. Another rule flashed in my mind, a stark warning: do not acknowledge the singing. His screams sounded real enough, filled with genuine agony, but the way he said my name felt off. It was calm and monotone, almost perfectly enunciated, like it was a recording played over his cries for help. A chilling deception. It didn't sit right with me, a dissonance that screamed danger. I hesitated as the green light grew, reaching 7 feet high, an undulating column of sickening luminescence. The screams grew louder, more high-pitched, more desperate, but I'd hear my name every few seconds, clear and calm. It sounded exactly like it was being dubbed over the screams, an unnatural overlay of sound. Just then, the familiar spectral longboat appeared down the water, its blue glow cutting through the green mist, and pulled up right at the glowing wreckage. The captain of the lost fleet stepped out, seemingly walking on water, his form unwavering. He walked straight into the green light, unfazed by its intensity, and carried out the diver. He didn't even look human anymore. He looked more like a being made of pure green light, his form shimmering and translucent. He walked normally as the captain of the lost fleet guided him to the depths of the longboat, his movements as precise as ever. I wasn't at the entrance, but gave the officer a salute anyway, a silent acknowledgement of the rules. The water cleared as the boat sailed away. There was no trace of the wrecked diver or the strange light, just the calm, dark water. I kept staring at the water, my mind reeling. I felt sick at how close I was to breaking a rule, at how easily I could have fallen victim to the illusion. A loud banging coming from inside the lighthouse snapped me out of it, pulling me back to the present. With a jolt, heart racing, I followed the sound to the small brass mirror above the basin. I hesitated, my hand hovering, and remembered the rule about not looking at mirrors between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. It wasn't quite that time yet, so I risked a quick look, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was causing the commotion. What I saw nearly knocked the wind out of me, stealing my breath. In the mirror, another version of myself was desperately pounding on the glass, its face contorted in abject terror. It wore my clothes, but they were torn and covered in algae, clinging to its frame. A nasty cut was bleeding down its cheek, a vivid red against its pale skin, and its fists were bloody as it impacted against the glass, leaving smears of crimson. The reflection looked utterly terrified, eyes wide with panic, pleading for release. Remembering the rule about ignoring mirrors between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., I glanced at my watch, my eyes darting to the time. It was still a few minutes shy of 3 a.m., so technically, I was still in the clear to look. But what I saw was making me wish I hadn't, making me question every decision I'd made. Turning back to the mirror, my gaze fixed on the unsettling reflection, I noticed that spectral lights appeared in the distance behind my desperate reflection, faint blue glows. I spun around to check the water, but it was empty. No boat, no lights, Nothing. Looking back in the mirror, I saw a large shadowy submersible had pulled up to the lighthouse. It was a salvage vessel, its form dark and imposing, and my reflection still frantically pounded the glass, its cries silent but evident in its movements. I watched horrified as a tall man in a dark oil-soaked suit stepped out of the submersible, his figure emerging from the dark depths. The weirdest part, he was wearing a deep-sea anglerfish mask, its bioluminescent lure swinging gently, casting an eerie, pulsating light. The man in the anglerfish mask reached the lighthouse in the mirror and did something unthinkable, something that defied all logic. He crawled right through the small lantern room window, his body distorting as he passed through the solid glass. My heart was pounding out of my chest, a frantic drum against my ribs as I rechecked my watch. It was precisely 3 a.m. Remembering the rule, its warning echoing in my mind, I forced myself to turn away from the mirror, to break eye contact with the horrific scene unfolding within it. Behind me, the banging grew even louder, more frantic, more desperate. I could feel each thud vibrating through the floor of the lighthouse, resonating through my very bones. The glass groaned under the strain, and a horrifying crunch reverberated, chilling me to my core. And then everything went silent. I squeezed my eyes shut, placing my hands over my ears, pressing hard as I tried to block out all the noise, to shut out the terrifying sounds. The rule was clear: do not engage with the mirror. From 3 a.m. to 4 a.m., I had to ignore it, no matter what happened, no matter the terror it inflicted. As I stood there, trying to block out the horrific sounds from the mirror, trying to remain steadfast in my resolve, the silence that followed the crunch was suddenly replaced by a new, equally disturbing sound, a loud, wet sloshing. It was repetitive and consistent, a steady, sickening rhythm, and each thump sounded wetter than the last, as if something viscous was being dragged. Just then, the fishing vessel rolled up to the lighthouse, its engine a low rumble. Trying to look normal, trying to maintain a semblance of control, I took the driver's salty tear and activated the green light to let them through. The driver gave me a nod and sailed off, disappearing into the dark. Nothing unusual there. A routine interaction. Then another boat came, and another, and another. Each driver looked completely normal and offered the tear without any fuss, their faces unremarkable. For a moment it almost felt normal, like I was working a regular lighthouse job, guiding ordinary ships, except it wasn't. It was 3 a.m. on some remote, dangerous coast, a time when no sane person would be out. It shouldn't be this busy. Who were these people heading in and out of the harbor at such an hour? Something was off, deeply unsettling. The steady stream of vessels seemed too timed, too regular, an unnatural procession. Throughout it all, that awful, pulpy, sloshing sound continued against the mirror, a relentless, sickening accompaniment to the strange parade of boats. It was relentless, and as I waved through the next boat, I heard a new sound, distinct from the sloshing. I could hear the sound of deep-sea creatures in between each thud, faint but undeniable, gurgling, clicking, even the occasional low moan, sounds that spoke of unfathomable depths, but it was unmistakable, a horrifying chorus accompanying the wet sloshing. I tried to focus on the water, the captains, offering their tears, on anything but the sounds behind me, but it was hard, almost impossible. The sloshing seemed to grow louder and more desperate, with each passing minute, a maddening rhythm. It felt like each sound was being drilled into my brain, echoing in my skull. As soon as the clock struck 4 a.m., the familiar sight of a spectral longboat cut through the darkness. It was the captain of the lost fleet again, his spectral blue glow, a welcome sight. But this time, something was strapped to the top of his longboat. It was a giant anglerfish head, much larger than any I'd ever seen, a grotesque trophy. The thing was so big, it looked like it might just fall off at any second, precariously balanced. This wasn't like any anglerfish you'd picture, not a creature of the natural world. It had a face covered in thick, slimy tentacles, writhing faintly. It had glowing, unblinking eyes that stared straight ahead, a malevolent gaze. Yellowish-green slime dripped from its gaping maw, leaving trails on the boat. The strangest part, it had sharp, jagged teeth that protruded from its lower jaw, like rusted knives, glinting in the faint light. As he passed by the lighthouse, I remembered the rules and gave the captain of the lost fleet a quick salute, my arm rising in automatic reverence. The moment his boat passed through, the disturbing sloshing noise haunting me from the mirror finally stopped. A sudden blissful silence. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, my lungs burning with the effort. I checked my watch. It was safe now. The forbidden hour had passed. Cautiously, I turned to look at the mirror. It looked normal, like any other mirror, reflecting the quiet room, except for a small, thin crack in the center, a jagged line that ran through the glass, a permanent scar from the night's horrors. As the night wore on, the lighthouse settled into a routine. Sometimes, the foghorn I listened to would turn to that weird hum, echoes from the deep. It would play some eerie Gregorian-like chants, ancient and profound, before flipping back to its gentle thrum, its normal rhythm. I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the water and the boats that came through, their forms indistinct in the pre-dawn light. Then a large cargo ship approached the lighthouse, its massive hull cutting through the water. As it neared, the captain opened the bridge window to offer the tea. That's when I noticed something alarming, something that sent a fresh wave of horror through me. His head was turned entirely backward, twisted at an impossible angle, as if somebody had violently wrenched his neck. Struggling to maintain my composure, to keep my face impassive, I quickly allowed the cargo ship to pass, desperate for it to be gone. As it sailed away, I saw more faces in the back windows. They were all staring at me, their heads also twisted backward, their eyes wide and unblinking, a silent, chilling accusation. Not long after, as the sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, a woman driving a shiny new speedboat pulled up. The boat was so new, it practically gleamed under the lighthouse beam, an incongruous sight in the worn ancient bay. She leaned out to offer her tea and asked if I had seen her father sail by, her voice bright and cheerful. I couldn't be sure, couldn't remember. So many boats had come and gone, their captains blurring into a faceless procession. The woman just laughed, a light, carefree sound that seemed utterly out of place with everything that's happened during the long, terrifying night. She sailed off, leaving a trail of shimmering, iridescent scales fluttering on the water behind her, catching the nascent light, a final, beautiful anomaly. As dawn approached, and I counted the minutes until my shift ended at 6 a.m., a dull ache thrumming in my head, I suddenly heard what sounded like a massive, wet flapping in the distance. It was a sound that defied description. Heavy and resonant, I squinted down the water, trying to make sense of the monstrous shape approaching the lighthouse. As it drew closer, the sound clarified into the powerful beating of numerous fleshy wings against the air, a sickening thudding. What emerged from the darkness was horrifying. A giant, dark creature, resembling a colossal manta ray, but with a human torso and head protruding from its back, its skin slick and glistening, the rest of its body stretched out into segmented, tentacled lengths, trailing through the water. rushing towards me with terrifying speed, its eyes fixed on the lighthouse. This wasn't mentioned in any of the rules. Nothing in Dad's ancient parchment had prepared me for this. As it reached the lighthouse, it started slamming its massive body against the glass of the lantern room, each impact shaking the entire structure. Up close, I could see that its body was made up of stitched-up, shimmering scales, so gruesomely put together that I couldn't tell if they were human remains or something else entirely. Despite the violence of its actions, the creature's human face remained eerily calm, devoid of any emotion, as it continued to smash its body against the lighthouse, its eyes fixed on me. With each crash, I felt the structure shake violently, the old stone straining under the assault, groaning in protest. The manta ray monster began to wrap its long, powerful tentacles around the lighthouse, constricting it like an octopus, squeezing with immense force. The windows fogged up with the press of its dark, slick skin against the glass, and soon I could barely see outside, trapped in a murky, suffocating embrace. The lighthouse creaked and groaned under the pressure, its very foundations threatening to give way. I backed away from the windows, my heart pounding, unsure of what to do next, utterly helpless. The rules had prepared me for a lot, for strange visitors and unsettling encounters, but nothing like this, nothing so overwhelmingly terrifying. Through the twisted, tentacled mass of the manta ray monster, I could see the spectral blue flashing of lights in the distance, a familiar, comforting glow, thinking about all the times the captain of the Lost Fleet had shown up right when I needed help, a guardian in the night. I scrambled to activate the green guiding light, hoping somehow it might signal him or anyone else who could see, a desperate plea for assistance. Suddenly, there was a loud crash outside, an earth-shattering impact, and the lighthouse shook violently, vibrating to its core. The manta ray creature hissed loudly, a guttural, furious sound, its grip tightening around the lighthouse, but it stayed put, squeezing harder, its tentacles constricting. I couldn't see what was happening outside. Then deep, thrumming sounds rang out, vibrating through the air, followed by wet, tearing sounds, like immense fabric being ripped apart. The lantern room went dark, plunged into complete blackness. As the light source was severed, I could only wait, crouched in the darkness, hoping for it to be over soon, for the ordeal to end. More thrumming erupted, closer this time, and the lighthouse shook again, more violently than before, a powerful tremor. It was so forceful that it knocked me off my feet, sending me crashing into the edge of the control panel. A sharp, searing pain flared bright and sharp in my head, a blinding agony, and then everything went black, utterly silent. When I came to, my watch alarm was beeping. 6:30 a.m. The early morning light filtered through the lantern room, soft and gentle, banishing the shadows of the night. To my shock, it looked completely normal. No signs of a monster, no damage, no ghostly figures, just silence, and the sunrise painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. I felt a dull ache where I hit my head, a lingering reminder of the night's events, but picked myself up and made my way back to town, my legs feeling strangely heavy. As I approached, I saw my dad waiting for me, his figure silhouetted against the rising sun. His expression was serious, and there was a hint of concern in his eyes, a depth of understanding.
"Do you understand why the rules are important now? Why someone must always be at the lighthouse at night?" he asked, his voice low and solemn.
I nodded, still processing everything, the horrors of the night replaying in my mind. But what was that thing? The manta ray creature. His face grew somber, a shadow passing over his features. We call it the Soul Taker. It's why we don't let anyone go out to sea at night. It doesn't come often, thank the heavens. But I'm truly sorry it came on your first shift, son. He paused, then gestured towards a small, weathered locket hanging around my neck, a family heirloom. Look closely at that locket, Thomas. Your great-grandfather gave it to your grandmother, and it's been passed down. Now think about the captain of the Lost Fleet, and the compass he wore. I reached for the locket, my fingers tracing the familiar engravings of a lighthouse and a compass. My eyes widened as the connection clicked into place. A chilling revelation. The captain of the Lost Fleet and his compass. It was identical. He's our captain, I whispered, the realization sending shivers down my spine. Dad nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. The rule about saluting him is a new one, added by your great-grandfather many years ago. He's been trying to get his head back from that thing for decades now, locked in an endless struggle. In the meantime, he helps out at the lighthouse, when he can, a silent guardian against the encroaching darkness. He'll always protect you. You know, you're his great-grandson, part of his lineage, and he watches over our family. He didn't offer any more explanations, leaving the deeper mysteries of the lighthouse and our family's pact with the sea to linger in the morning light.